The fear that keeps most people financially small is not the fear of failure. Failure is familiar. Failure is understandable. Failure has excuses. The fear that quietly controls behavior is the fear of success, and most people don't even realize they're afraid of it. They think they want more money, more freedom, more stability, more control. But when real progress appears, something inside them hesitates. They delay. They distract themselves. They sabotage momentum. They retreat to comfort. Not because they can't succeed, but because success threatens parts of their identity that feel safe. Let's start with a hard truth. Success changes things, not just numbers in a bank account, but how you are seen, how you are treated, how you see yourself. And the brain is deeply suspicious of change, even positive change, because the brain prioritizes safety over growth, and safety lives in the familiar. Financial success pulls you out of the familiar. It separates you from old patterns, old habits, old reference points, and separation feels dangerous to a brain wired for belonging. Now let's talk about how this fear forms. Most people grow up absorbing beliefs about money without realizing it. Money changes people. Rich people are greedy. Success creates distance. More means more responsibility. More means more expectations. These beliefs don't live in logic. They live in emotion. So when success approaches, the brain doesn't evaluate opportunity. It evaluates threat. Threat to relationships. Threat to identity. Threat to belonging. Threat to self-image. And when threat is detected, behavior shifts automatically. Progress slows. Risk tolerance drops. Comfort behaviors increase. This is how fear of success operates. Quietly. Subtly. Plausibly. Now let's talk about identity. Your current financial level is not just an economic state. It's an identity. It comes with language, habits, social norms, expectations. When you grow financially, you don't just gain money, you risk losing identity alignment. People may expect more from you. You may be asked to help more. You may feel pressure to perform. You may feel watched. And the brain hates pressure, so it subconsciously limits growth to stay within an identity that feels manageable. Now let's talk about visibility. Success makes you visible. Visibility invites judgment, comparison, criticism, expectation. Staying financially small keeps you invisible. And invisibility feels safe. No one questions you. No one expects much. No one scrutinizes your choices, so progress is often capped right before visibility increases. People stop right below the line where attention would change. Now let's talk about responsibility. Money increases optionality, but it also increases responsibility. Responsibility to manage it, responsibility to make decisions, responsibility to not waste it. Some people subconsciously avoid success because they don't trust themselves with responsibility. They fear making irreversible mistakes. So staying small feels safer than risking visible error. Now let's talk about the fear of separation. As people grow financially, their environment often changes. Different conversations, different priorities, different stressors, and this can create emotional distance from people who were once close. Even the possibility of that distance triggers resistance. The brain asks, what if success costs me connection? And the brain will always choose connection over optimization. Always. So it keeps progress within socially acceptable limits. Now let's talk about the fear of permanence. Failure feels temporary. Success feels permanent. Once you succeed, expectations don't reset. People assume you'll always be okay, always capable, always strong. That's a heavy identity to carry. Some people subconsciously prefer the permission that comes with being on the way instead of arrived. Now let's talk about self-concept conflict. Many people see themselves as humble, low maintenance, not materialistic. Success threatens this self-image. So the brain creates internal conflict. If I succeed financially, who do I become? Rather than resolve the conflict, the brain avoids it by limiting growth. Now let's talk about timing. Fear of success often appears right after momentum builds, right when habits start working, right when systems stabilize, right when results become visible. People don't sabotage at the beginning, they sabotage at the edge. This is why people often say, I always mess things up when they start going well. They're not messing things up. They're protecting their identity. Now let's talk about control. Staying small gives the illusion of control. You know your limits. You understand your problems. You've rehearsed your struggles. Success introduces unknowns. Unknowns feel uncontrollable. So the brain chooses predictable discomfort over unpredictable improvement. Now let's talk about how fear of success disguises itself. It rarely says, I'm afraid of succeeding. It says, now isn't the right time. I need to learn more. I don't want to rush. I don't want to change too much. I want to stay balanced. All reasonable, all protective, all limiting. Now let's talk about how this fear keeps people financially small. They avoid scaling systems. They underinvest in themselves. They keep income just below discomfort. They avoid compounding decisions. They remain busy, but not expansive. Now let's talk about the breakthrough. The fear of success is not something you eliminate. It's something you understand. Once you see it, it loses power. Because you realize hesitation doesn't mean danger. It means growth. Now let's talk about reframing success. Success does not require abandoning values. It does not require abandoning people. It does not require becoming someone else. It requires expanding capacity. Capacity for responsibility. Capacity for visibility. Capacity for choice. And capacity grows slowly. Not through force. Through exposure. Now let's talk about controlled expansion. People who overcome fear of success don't leap. They widen their comfort zone incrementally. Slightly higher savings, slightly more responsibility, slightly more visibility. The brain adapts, safety recalibrates, and what once felt threatening becomes normal. Now let's talk about identity anchoring. Successful people anchor identity internally, not externally. They define themselves by values, not circumstances. So growth doesn't threaten who they are, it expresses it. Now let's talk about permission. Many people wait for permission to succeed. From family, from culture, from peers. That permission rarely comes. So growth requires self-authorization. Quiet, internal, non-dramatic. Now let's talk about the final shift. Fear of success doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. It means your brain is doing what it was designed to do. Protect. But protection is not always progress, and safety is not always freedom. Growth begins when you realize you can feel fear and still move forward, slowly, deliberately, without burning bridges, without abandoning yourself. Financial expansion doesn't require becoming someone else. It requires allowing yourself to take up more space. Space in decisions, space in options, space in life. And the people who allow that space quietly outgrow the limits that once felt permanent. Not because they forced success, but because they stopped running from it. There's another layer to the fear of success that most people never recognize. Success doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see your past. And that can be deeply uncomfortable. When you grow financially, you're forced to reinterpret your earlier struggles. You start asking questions like, why didn't I do this sooner? Was I holding myself back? Did I waste time? That kind of reflection can trigger regret. And regret is painful. So the brain avoids success not because it fears the future, but because it fears reevaluating the past. Staying financially small preserves the narrative. It allows people to say, I would have done better if circumstances were different. I didn't have the opportunity. I did the best I could. Success removes those protective stories, and the brain clings to stories because they preserve emotional coherence. Now let's talk about emotional debt. When people imagine financial success, they often imagine emotional debts attached to it. If I earn more, I'll have to help more people. If I grow, people will ask more from me. If I succeed, I'll owe explanations. If I succeed, I'll owe generosity. These expectations may not even be real, but the brain treats them as certain. So growth feels expensive emotionally, and when emotional cost feels high, behavior slows. Now let's talk about the fear of being wrong. When you stay small, mistakes feel acceptable. But when you succeed, mistakes feel public. People imagine, if I fail now, it will prove I didn't deserve it. If I mess up, everyone will see. So instead of risking visible mistakes, they choose invisible stagnation. This is why many people plateau right before a leap. They can tolerate struggle. They can tolerate obscurity. They struggle with visibility. Now let's talk about safety signals. Your current financial level sends signals to your nervous system. You know what to expect. You know how to cope. You know your limits. Growth destabilizes those signals. Uncertainty increases. Responsibility expands. Options multiply. And paradoxically, too many options can feel unsafe. So the brain limits expansion to preserve predictability. Now let's talk about how fear of success shapes daily behavior. People procrastinate on scalable actions. They delay raising prices. They undercharge. They avoid investing in growth. They choose comfort tasks over leverage tasks. They stay busy but small. Effort replaces expansion. Now, let's talk about why people mistake this for humility. It's often framed as, I don't need much. I'm not ambitious. I value balance. Sometimes that's true, but often it's fear wearing a socially acceptable mask because ambition threatens equilibrium, and equilibrium feels safe. Now let's talk about internal permission. People who grow financially give themselves permission incrementally. They don't wait for certainty. They don't wait for fear to disappear. They move with fear present. They normalize discomfort. They accept that expansion feels awkward at first. This is crucial. Fear doesn't mean stop. It means stretch. Now let's talk about the role of systems again. Systems protect people from the emotional volatility of growth. Automatic saving, automatic investing, automatic scaling. When growth is automated, the emotional brain doesn't interfere as much. This is why many people grow more easily when they set it and forget it. They bypass fear by reducing conscious involvement. Now let's talk about recalibration. The brain recalibrates safety through exposure. What feels scary at first becomes normal with repetition, but only if exposure is gradual. Sudden success can overwhelm. Gradual expansion builds confidence. This is why slow, steady growth is psychologically sustainable. Now let's talk about the myth of readiness. People wait to feel ready. Ready is a feeling. Growth is a process. You don't feel ready before growth. You feel ready after adaptation. Waiting for readiness is another form of avoidance. Now let's talk about the final internal shift. People who outgrow fear of success stop asking, am I allowed to have this? They start asking, what kind of responsibility can I handle next? They frame growth as capacity building, not identity rupture, and that framing changes everything. Now let's talk about success without separation. Success doesn't require abandoning people. It requires boundaries. Boundaries protect relationships. Boundaries protect values. Boundaries protect energy. People fear success because they imagine chaos. Boundaries prevent chaos. Now let's talk about the last illusion, that staying small is safer. It isn't. Staying small creates fragility. Stagnation increases vulnerability. Lack of margin increases fear. Growth, done slowly and intentionally, increases resilience. Now let's close with the core truth. Fear of success is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that your current identity is being outgrown, and growth always feels uncomfortable at the edges. The people who remain financially small aren't incapable. They're cautious. And caution has a cost. The people who expand aren't fearless. They're willing to feel fear without obeying it. They don't rush. They don't force. They don't pretend confidence. They move anyway. Quietly, gradually, deliberately. And over time, what once felt threatening becomes normal, not because fear disappeared, but because capacity expanded. That's how people grow without breaking themselves, not by eliminating fear, but by no longer letting it decide.